is the dating lab. Can you tell me what that is and how that is going?
Yes, absolutely. So having coached for a couple years in this particular area of Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, um, I have observed quite a few tendencies and patterns and behaviors among single people. And one of the common themes that I keep noticing is that people tend to be eager to acquire some kind of knowledge, and sometimes I think they even want a shortcut. They think once they learn something intellectually, it will help them make change practically. But what happens is just because they take this knowledge in and they don't really put it through practice, sooner or later it fades away, right? It disappears. So I have been teaching people in my coaching practice that you have the theoretical knowledge. That's the first step. You have to put it through practice in order for that knowledge to become your wisdom, your internalized wisdom on emotional level, mental, and intellectual level. So, having said that, I have come to realize that it's not enough for me as a coach to give people that theoretical knowledge and keep them accountable and push them to practice. So, I've decided to create a space where I can hold safe, supportive environment for them to interact with each other. So, the interactive dating lab is it's an idea to bring singles together, give them opportunities to practice because every single one of them is learning, but at the same time, they're singles. So they also have opportunities to connect. And I believe that when we know that, okay, I'm learning something and they're learning something, the pressure is a little bit lower. Does it make sense?
It does, because then you're getting people together who are single, who are looking for a relationship, and they're eager to maybe make it work because, let's say, for example, in the past, they couldn't make it work. And now you're getting them all together. And I think, at least for me, if I look back on my dating experience, proximity was an issue. Like I always felt that like sometimes you may think, oh, there's no good men in my city, there's no good women in my city. But once you get people together, then you understand, wait, there's a lot of good people out there who are looking for someone to spend the rest of their life with. Do you find that to be true that sometimes people give up because they don't see the quote unquote good people in front of them, but maybe it takes a little bit more effort to identify them?
Yes, yes, I do see that, and I hear that quite often, whether it's a social setting or online platforms, online dating platforms. People have this, well, I've tried, but it's not working. Like I literally just had somebody, one of my clients, one of my female clients, she sent me a message last week, and she's like, "Okay, I'm done. The ones that I like on online dating apps don't like me back." And the ones that like me, I'm not so interested in them, right? So she's like, "Ah, I'm gonna take a break." So it is quite common, but what people don't realize is mindset is a huge and a critical element in approaching dating and relationship search. And if you go in with the mindset where you are focused on scarcity, thinking like there's not enough people that fit my preferences, or there are simply not enough single people, whatever your limitation is, it's all in here, right? So mindset, switching from the mindset of scarcity and taking it into a mindset of abundance and opportunities makes a big difference, particularly in the approach in this situation.
What do you think then are some obstacles that maybe some people face in the early stages of their dating experience?
One of the biggest ones, I would say, people not being sure whether they are ready or not ready to date. I get asked this question very often. I have people coming to me who had been divorced and some time had passed, and they don't understand, they don't feel whether they are ready or they are not ready. And especially those people who had long-term relationship, they were, let's say, out of the dating scene for quite some time, and they do feel that lack of skill, lack of competence in approaching dating landscape. So they're like, well, I'm going to wait until I'm ready. But there is no waiting. You're never going to be ready. There is never going to be in the morning when you wake up, it's like, I'm ready to date. Let's do it. It's just not going to happen. You just got to go in and start making these little tiny steps. And as I always tell people that I coach and anybody that I get a chance to speak to about the relationship search, is it's like going up the stairs. You make stepping stones. Every interaction, every conversation, every connection and a date is a stepping stone towards your person, towards your relationship. Because if you're waiting to be ready and then boom, you meet your person, not gonna happen. That's not real life. An analogy that I give people is like, imagine if you're a dancer and you have this huge dance recital planned, right? Do you wait to get on the stage and you start dancing, or do you practice and then you do dance recital? You practice, right? Same in dating and relationship world. You gotta practice before you actually get to the point of being confident, competent, and ready to explore.
And that's something I always found interesting, but yet difficult for some people. They'll say things like, I'm ready right now, right? And then I'll ask them, okay, what makes you ready? And they have no answer. Hopes and dreams, right, Irina? And it's
Yep.
like, you
Yep.
have to go into it a little bit more than that, because I always give the example about like a job, right? Like when you apply for a job, what do? Usually look up the company. What are the benefits? How is it going to benefit you? How are you going to benefit the company? We need to do the same thing for our dating experience, because the more and more, at least in my experiences, the more and more heartbreak someone has, the more hesitant they are to be vulnerable for a relationship or open up, especially if they're hearing it from their friends, from their family, from online. Like you made a good example where someone said that the people I want, they don't want me, but the ones that I don't want, they want me.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you
Yep.
think so many people experience that, where there's men or women that they want, but they can't seem to get their attention or get a relationship with them, but the ones that they don't want, they seem to attract those, and they're trying to like push them away and look for better quality?
I think what truly hinders people in this particular situation of them thinking that those that they want don't want them and vice versa is that people, first of all, have high expectations as far as getting something that exactly what they want. So what do people do? They go in with a list. When I ask a person, 90% of the time, when I ask somebody, so what are you looking for in a relationship? They give me a list of qualities. I'm like, okay, we're going to throw away that shopping list and we're going to focus on the experiences and how you want to feel in the relationship. When I ask people, how do you want to feel in the relationship? It takes them some time to answer. So this is the trouble. We are going in with preconceived notion, a box, and we're trying to fit everybody in this box. And if they don't fit in the box, we throw them away. Instead of throwing the box away and going in with the open mind, open heart, and going, well, let me see what the life story is behind this person. Let me see what conversation we can make happen. And this is what I always say. It's not, don't even call it the first date. It's an opportunity to see if the conversation is possible. That's all you're there to do. You take that pressure off, you detach from that big outcome, and you focus on the conversation. So it's self-sabotage for the most part, but it's the lack of that openness of heart and mind that prevents people from aligning people that want you and that people that you want.
Do you think that's difficult for people to do, to understand that point you just made and move forward with their dating experiences?
It is difficult. It is difficult because our human nature is to simplify things, choose the way of the least resistance. It's just how we human on our basic level, that's how we function. Our minds are designed to preserve the energy. So we have so many biases we're having to deal with. So if we are unaware of those biases, if we haven't spent the time re-evaluating our belief system on which the relationship model is settled on, right? If we don't understand our triggers in relationship, if we don't know our attachment style, if we don't understand the difference between codependency and interdependency, then we are having trouble going in with the open mind and open heart because we're scared to fail. It comes down to that. We're scared to fail, so we don't try because we don't want to fail.
I recently learned quite a bit about the different attachment styles. And it was interesting for me and very eye-opening because when I looked at the different types, right, where you have, let's say, the secure and you have the anxious and you have the avoidant and things like that, I begin to understand. I was like, okay, this is why this situation happened in this relationship I was in. This is why this happened. And you begin to analyze and understand. And sometimes I look at like yourself, Irina, and I look at me and I look at other coaches or other therapists and mentors. And I wonder if we're at an advantage because for us to be where we are, we had to not only do work on ourselves, but we had to do work to enter this type of industry. Do you then think that some people who don't do the work are either avoiding the work or maybe they don't know that they require work?
I would say it's both. I would say some people don't know they need work, but in reality, at least my personal opinion, as somebody who has two divorces, and somebody who has been in the coaching industry for some time, working with people and working on my own relationship skills, I can say that it takes not only courage to admit that work is needed, but also a certain level of awareness to understand that the work is needed. And what I've learned myself personally is that it's excruciatingly difficult to come to that awareness that the work is needed on your own. That's difficult. When you have an objective view, when you have a sounding board, somebody you trust, somebody you feel safe with, that is much easier. At least that's what helped me personally many years ago when I'm like, like deep down, I'm like, okay, something's off, something's not right. Like, why I'm married for the second time, I'm still unhappy. What's going on? Like, but I wasn't ready yet at that point to admit that there was something wrong that I was doing until I had a professional going, listen, here's the thing, this, and this. These are your triggers, this is your reactions, this is your protest behaviors. She broke it down for me. And when she did, I was like, well, there's so much data now that I need work. I can't just hide from it. So, and then, yes, and then there's a category of people who do have that level of awareness, or at least a certain awareness that the work is needed, but they have difficulty taking on that challenge for various reasons. If they were shamed into keeping up a certain facade, for example, this is what I come across quite often. They're trying to be perceived perfect. So if they're perfectionists, if they're sticklers, right? It's extremely hard for them. They may know it, but it's going to be really hard for them to know, to say, you know what? I need help. I need somebody's guidance. I need somebody to help me and show me what to do. That requires certain courage. But it also, I believe it all comes from our childhood and from our early experiences to get to the point of understanding who we are at our core under the social and emotional conditioning that we go through in relationships, in childhood, school, and everything that's going on around us, the environment we grow up in.
How do you think then someone can identify if they're avoiding the situation or maybe learn what they can do to become aware of where they're falling short when it comes to dating and finding a partner that's going to make them happy throughout their life?
To be honest with you, it's an excellent question, but to be honest with you, when it comes to truly understanding how you attach to people, because we all attach, we absolutely need somebody to depend on. It's just, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's a difference between codependency and interdependence, right? But there is really no way around it. But going deeper into understanding what it is. This is why I always say like there should be a mandatory relationship course. It's like, oh, you wanna be in a relationship? Here's a 6 months course. Once you pass it and get your certification, then you can move in together, get engaged, get married, and so on. It's one of my unpopular opinions that people don't like hearing. But at the end of the day, it's the knowledge is there. We're so lucky to live in the day and age where the abundance of information accessible so quickly and so easily, right? But it's that information, seeking out that information that has to be combined with somebody holding that safe space for you, like you do as a coach, or when I do it as a coach with my clients to keep nudging you in the right direction. But the first step is with uh, seeking out that information. That's where it starts.
There was someone I was working with, Irina, and she mentioned she is in her 60s and she got married like a lot of people from that generation in their 20s and then it didn't work out. And then she was dating here and there, trying to find love in all the wrong places. And you probably have heard so many people say that, right? I just can't make it work. As she got older, she began to give up on love. And then when I started working with her, I asked her the question. I was like, "Why is that? Why do you think um, you won't be able to find love as you continue to grow into the person you are until you grow older?" And she's like, "Terrain, at this point in my life, I think love is for people who are younger, who are in their 20s and 30s." And I
Mhm.
made the same face, and I was like, "Love knows no age limit. Love doesn't expire." And she took a step back and she understood what I was saying, but she had a difficult time accepting it just because of what she was seeing. So I would ask you then is if you've worked with men or women who are, let's say, older in age, in your experiences, do you find that their outlook on love is different, or are they maybe a little bit hesitant because, like in the example I gave, they don't think they can find it anymore because of their age?
First of all, I love the fact that you said love doesn't expire. It's a beautiful saying. I might have to steal it. So I apologize in advance. But as far as so yes, I do have clients over 60, both men and women. And surprisingly, I would say, at least so far, I've had people that they still want love. And they may have dropped the romanticized idea of love. So I would think the biggest difference, if I'm coaching somebody who is 25, they have a certain relationship model formed by possibly some Disney fairy tales and Hallmark movies, which is not reality. We all know that. And then somebody who have gone through relationship struggles. So they still want love because we are wired to want love. So as you're describing this lady that you were helping, she still wants love, but she's given up based on her past experience, right? Love, though, is not a feeling. And this is when I talk to everybody, and there's like, I want to find the love of my life. And I ask them, okay, so what is love for you? And they start once again describing some kind of a hallmark moment. uh, that's not love. Love is an action that you take every single day. Love is when you show up to your partner when you are tired, when you have a fight, and then you're going to have to gather up your emotions and have that difficult conversation and go through certain disconnect and then reconnect. This is love. But I think there is a bit of an expectation that love always supposed to feel like elation, enthusiasm. But that's not love. That's chemicals. We probably get that a little bit at the beginning, but that fades away, it doesn't stay.
What kind of impact do you think the Disney version of love or romance is having on those who are dating or in relationships?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's not only Disney. I think it's combined the movies, the songs, the social media currently. It creates such a distorted idea of what real relationship, real love and relationship entails. But what it does, in my opinion, is it highlights only the good, but it doesn't show what kind of work it takes to get to that good. It's like we'll watch a movie and it's a great, and let's say it's a sex scene, right? And they show you they are making out and then they come into the apartment, he pins her against the wall, they have sex, she has orgasm in 2 minutes. In real life, that's not possible, right? But somebody who is watching this beautiful passionate love scene, they go, oh, I want that. It's not even physiologically possible. So it's, again, like we crave this passion, this movie like scenes, when in reality, those are so rare to come about. And that's just once in a blue moon. And that's not love. So I think it has quite a negative impact for the most part.
I can just see my my girlfriend's like, I want that 2 minute orgasm.
I'm sorry if I messed it up for anybody.
Right? Like you have people out there is like, well, I'm still gonna hold on to that because you're right. Like when we watch movies, we'll hold on to, I don't want to say the fantasy, but we'll hold on to, okay, you know what? If I can get that, I'll want that. It's like 50 Shades of Grey when that movie came out, right? Or it's like The Notebook. And sometimes I remember I watched The Notebook with my girlfriend at the time, who's not my girlfriend now, and she was so into the movie. She's like, "Oh my god, that's so romantic." To your point, right? And the
Mhm.
impact it had on our relationship. And then I asked her the question. I was like, "You do realize that she's cheating on her fiance, right?" She's like, "Oh, don't say that." I was like, "But she's
But
fantasizing about another person, and she wants to have a relationship with another person, and she ended up having an intimate moment with another person." I'm like, "You do realize that, right?" So when we point that out, it's interesting to see that in the movie setting or even online or wherever, is that if we romanticize it enough, we'll accept the most toxic of behaviors. I seen someone online. There's this video where the guy was saying that, "Oh, honey, I can't hang out with you. I'm going to spend time with the guys, right?" And
Mhm.
then she was like, "Are you choosing your friends over me?" It's like you better come home tonight. If you don't come home tonight, don't come home at all. I'm gonna change all the locks. I'm going to I'm gonna have your car towed, everything. Your clothes are gonna be on the driveway. This is just
Okay.
it was a skit, right? I go into the comments now. Everyone's like, if my love isn't like that, I don't want it. And I'm like,
Right.
this is abusive.
That's that's not
Right? What are your thoughts on that, Irina?
on not letting your partner go hang out with the guys, and then that's, I think that's extremely unhealthy. And this is actually, I know we're kind of laughing about it, but that is a legit challenge that people have to face because uh, many people don't realize that in order to get, like when I coach the ladies, I tell them, hey, before you get the guy, get a life, because you don't want to make that one person responsible for your leisure time outside of your job. And that's a lot of pressure. So he and she, one partner and the other partner, absolutely have to have their individual things done outside of the relationship, so they can come together, share those experiences, talk about those experiences, right? But being that territorial, that's extremely unhealthy. And that's an expression, if it takes place in real life, that's like an expression on deep self-esteem issues and just a toxic approach to relationship.
Especially when you have people, even though for the most part it's very likely it was a skit, they were acting out something, right? But they're
But it
acting
does
out,
happen in real life.
I was about to say,
Like
they're
I
acting
talk
out
to
a real life
women.
situation, right? To your point, right? They're acting out a real life situation, and you have people who are encouraging it and championing it. Why do you think that happens where you have people saying that, yeah, it may be bad, but because to our point, right, they're romanticizing it, they're willing to accept toxic or unhealthy situations or behaviors?
Because not a lot of, oof, that's not gonna be coming off good. Um, Many people have difficulty thinking for themselves and like pausing before they jump onto the social media wagon and they start like chiming in with something that is been shown. And I believe it's just the desire to experience some kind of intense emotion there, some kind of intense reaction. Because if you step back and you're like, okay, so let me see what's going on there. Like, she said that, he did that. That is strange. Why is she doing that? And why is he doing that? We don't you really take step back and think through things, especially when it's, something on video like that. So I think it's just kind of a common desire to it's very easy to express something when you're sitting typing behind the screen. Comments are hilarious. It's just like there's so many things there. It's like, wow, people need to get a life. If they type that type of comments, they need to go get a life. um but it's just the hiding behind the screen and typing things that don't make any sense.
You mentioned earlier where when you're working with people, you tell them before you can get a relationship, you want them to get a life, right? Maybe hobbies or something
Yeah.
like that, things like that, right? Do you then think that maybe, do you think that some people suffer an identity crisis when they enter a relationship, meaning that once they enter a relationship, they seem to forget how life was before this person and who they were, and now they're maybe so dependent on this person for their leisure time, they don't even remember who they were?
Yes, it does happen. It absolutely happens. And this is where I have to urge people, it's like don't merge. You have to know who you are. You have to keep your passions, your hobbies. If you don't have any and you go into that relationship space and that person suddenly, let's say it goes really great at the beginning, and that person fills all that space for you, God forbid something happens down the road, and it will, it's inevitable. There's always the raptures in the relationship. Something will happen, and then you feel you just lost your whole grounding, right? Because you have fully, completely relied on this person. Um, and this losing sense of identity of your identity actually happens in different dimensions of relationship, and I see that a lot with parents, especially women that sacrificed their many years for raising children. That's all they had focused on, right? And now when the kids leave and they're on their own, women come to me and they're like, I don't know who I am as a woman. They literally have to learn who they are as women without being a mom. And that's identity crisis. This happens quite often. So having strong sense of your own identity, and that includes having your hobbies and interests, knowing what you like, constantly exploring something new, learning new skills, having passions, having your own friends circle, having social life, that all is part of it, part of the identity as self.
What do you say then to the men and women who all they're the majority of their life they've been in a relationship. So, for example, if they've been in a relationship for 2 years and that one ends within a couple months, maybe a few weeks, they're in another one. What about the people who are in a relationship after relationship after relationship and they don't ever get a break to understand who they are because their identity has always been tied to someone else?
There is an excellent book written by Logan Uri, and she's a dating coach, and she is also, I believe, she works as a behavioral scientist at Hinge dating platform. And I read her book a while ago, and she talks about two types of people, those that hitch and those that ditch. So she, ditchers and hitchers, she calls them. And she explains that there is a type of a person who will go from one relationship to the other relationship to the other relationship, because once they reach the point of where they need to make a conscious decision about, hey, I'm going to be building life with this person, they realize that they've lost that romantic sense of novelty that they had at the beginning, and now they're seeking that excitement again. So they go into a next one. So in this case, their identity is kind of tied to that romantic idea of a relationship and constantly seeking that sense of novelty and excitement. And we all know that the sense of excitement, the sense of novelty will go away. Guaranteed. It will go away. It will not stay the same, right? So I I wish this sense of identity, the healthy sense of self, this is what I teach in my group coaching programs. We start with like, who are you? And I always ask people this question, what makes you you? 90% of people have a hard time answering that question. They've never thought about it, right? So this sense of self and sense of identity has to be not only identified, but it has to be revisited often and evaluated at different phases of our lives, because it evolves, it changes. Hopefully, it should evolve and grow and change.
What do you say then is a healthy example of a self identity?
What comes to mind first is somebody's ability to say, there's so much I don't know that I would like to know. Somebody's ability to go, well, I might be confident and competent in this realm, but I'm not confident here. So let me go and try that out because that's uncomfortable, and see if I can bring certain qualities and traits into my character and personality to keep building up this sense of self. So, in my opinion, this is healthy. When you are driven by improvement, self-development, it's growth. Is there is a difference between growth mindset and the mindset that just fixed, that just stands to stagnate, doesn't want to make any changes. So healthy sense of self, on knowing who you are today, but also knowing that's not who you are going to be tomorrow, and then be willing to constantly adapt and adjust and try things out.
I'll tell you, thank you for that because I want to get a different perspective. Because the reason why I asked that question, Irina, is that there's two people that I know. One's a man, one's a woman. And the woman, she always, not always, but for let's say from her 30s up until she's probably in her mid 40s now, I'm guessing because I don't have communication with her consistently anymore. But she wanted to be a mother, right? So she began to associate her identity with that. And it was to the point where she was looking to become a parent by any means necessary. So,
Oof, okay.
oof, I know bad news, right? So she became a mother with a person that maybe wasn't the best fit because it wasn't shortly afterwards that there was physical violence between the two on both parties, right? Because they just brought out the worst in each other. Or some people would say it was always there, but now they have a reason to unleash this. And then you have another man, you have a man now separate from this. He began to associate with a lot of things that he saw online, like the high value man. And he was so determined to be a part of that identity. He started to behave that way, and he became someone that would mistreat women. He would talk down, "You're not worthy of me. You're not worthy of that." Even though behind the scenes, he didn't have the resources, the time, the energy, the pedigree, the social status of a quote unquote high value man. So I asked that question to get a healthy example because I've seen people adopt unhealthy identities, thinking it's going to get them the results that they desire in their life. Have you seen that as well?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is what I meant when it resonates with what you were saying as well as when I said that you need to get to the core of who you are under the layers of social and emotional conditioning that we all go through. It's inevitable because we will soak up whatever our environment is around us, right? But staying mindful and staying aware through the fact that we are taking that in and checking in often on that sense of identity is very much needed. But people do have those facades. And you know how I know? I had one for quite some time. And it took me some hard work to take down the facade and actually try to understand who I am under all of those layers of the way I was brought up. Because I was brought up in a very toxic environment with an extremely toxic mentality towards men. So it took me some time to work through it. But it requires work. It's a constant movement and it's a constant change. And not a lot of people are willing to accept the fact that it's always work.
What do you think then, or what advice, sorry, would you give someone who has done the work, but they've entered a relationship with someone who still needs to have work done because they see some of these behaviors that are not conducive to a healthy relationship?
That's a great question, and this is such a delicate territory. I'll tell you, I come across this all the time. Like I would coach somebody, and I have an example. I just spoke with somebody a couple of days ago. I coached her last year. She did an amazing work. Uh, she worked hard on developing new skills, learning how to communicate, learning how to verbalize her own needs, emotions, because she was quite an avoider. She spent quite a bit of time in an abusive, toxic marriage for many years. She got into a relationship and nice guy, but as she's sharing with me, I'm like, he is not prioritizing you, and you are not pushing hard enough to define the relationship. And she's like, yeah, I'll talk maybe next week, maybe next week. I'll ask him. So my advice is when you have done the work, but you're with the person where there is something, there is a potential, there is a click, you feel good, but there's still some things that are missing. My advice is to have an honest conversation and ask questions to understand whether that person actually understands that relationship require work. And if the other person does not have to be exactly on the same level, aligned with our level of growth and awareness, but the willingness to do the work has to be there. Because if there is no willingness to do the work, even if you're on different levels, then there is nothing you can co-create, because otherwise it's just going to be completely one-sided. You're going to be pulling weight for two people and the other one's just going to enjoy the ride.
How does the person who's doing the work get impacted by their partner who doesn't want to do the work when it comes to the growth of that relationship and maybe the longevity of it?
Well, then I think that would depend on the person. Those that are more resilient, they will take it as a learning lesson and opportunity to evolve even more, opportunity to get some more wisdom. If they're not extremely hyper vigilant, if they don't have the tendency to catastrophize, and I would assume somebody who have done some work, they had worked on their certain sabotaging behaviors and certain mindset shift. So the impact would depend of how strong you feel about yourself. I guess we're returning back to that sense of identity and healthy sense of self. Seems like everything just revolves around there, because if the foundation is not there, if you don't feel grounded in who you are, even though growth is needed continuously, then everything else will be much more challenging, close to impossible to achieve.
Yeah, you put the person, both parties actually, in a difficult situation because you may, and I've seen this where one person is growing at a rate that unfortunately is outpacing their partner. So now there's the gap is widening and widening, right? And I sometimes think once that person realizes it, because maybe when you're in the beginning, you don't see it, but once you start to understand, okay, I'm outgrowing my partner, and you identify that there's a gap, you have a choice at that point, right? Do you continue to grow and that gap widens? Because you only can control what you can control. Or, and I've seen some coaches tell me, the person will stop. They're like, you know what? I don't want to continue to grow because I'm leaving my partner behind. And if I leave them behind emotionally, I may have to leave them behind when it comes to the relationship. Do you see some people maybe stop their progress, their healing, their growth because they don't want to maybe separate from their partner, which maybe they think eventually will happen?
I have not seen it, at least not in the form that you had presented, but it's absolutely possible that that gap will be widening and widening. But if somebody decides to stop, that means that you're not being true to yourself anymore. Because if you're doing that for another person, that means that you are giving up on yourself. And for what reason? If you feel you need to give up on yourself in order to please, quote unquote, the other person's lack of growth, then that's not healthy relationship. And what you're describing, this is, you just described me essentially. You described my second marriage. I got married, I had not done any work on myself. And then when I had my kids, this is where I realized I need help. And that's where I started seeking therapy and I started working on myself. I created momentum and I invited my then husband into the process of learning together, growing together, changing, because I was doing pretty well with my growth and it was exciting. He refused. He refused once, he refused twice, and I had to make that decision. Well, here I am. I outgrown my relationship. We used to be a match. We no longer a match. And I left. And I left the relationship because there was absolutely no willingness on his part to come even closer to where I was inviting him to come as far as the growth.
I wonder if that's maybe one of the reasons why people dislike us so much.
Could be.
Could be, right? Because you sit down with someone, you point out what isn't working in a relationship or what is working, but from the conversation you and I have, it's self-realization. We don't tell them, oh, you know what, Johnny's bad or Jane is bad or Johnny is good. We don't tell them that. We help them come to their own conclusions. And when they realize, like, wow, I've been actually allowing this type of behavior all these years. Once they see clearly now that the rain is gone, right? They can't unsee it anymore. Do you find maybe that to be difficult? Maybe not with the people you work with, if it does happen, but us in general, where people, when someone sees what is wrong, and they're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to put that back into the closet, close the door, and pretend that it isn't there.
People do it all the time. People do it all the time. I did that too. I was so good at convincing myself. I was extremely good at pretending nothing bad was happening. nothing unhealthy was happening. But I kept taking it out of the closet, looking at it, it's like, nope, not ready, put it back in the closet. And if I'm being extremely honest, it took me probably at least 7, 8 years to get to the point where I finally exited that relationship. But I'm only able to do it now when I'm this smart, having learned from all my relationship struggles and mistakes to look back and connect the dots. But back then it was different. Back then I didn't feel the confidence that I feel now. I couldn't just walk away easily. So it's painful for people. It's painful to see that clearly. And we don't want to see it because we don't want to change anything, because we want things to stay familiar to us. Unknown is scary as hell. So some people will keep that stuff in the closet forever and ever. And I have people, they schedule a complimentary coaching call with me, and I dedicate an hour just to learn their life story and see how I can guide them. And most people, they do proceed with coaching, but there are always somebody who will listen to me and I can see they're getting clarity, but they don't like it and they will not contact me again.
Do you then think that being comfortable in the misery plays a factor in people seeking help?
People will tell themselves stories, will justify their own behaviors, will create their self-fulfilling prophecies just to stay in their comfort zone. Miserable, yet comfort zone. And I see this all the time, all the time. It is tough to exit the comfort zone and make changes. But magic happens only outside of your comfort zone, not inside.
And I can understand to your point, right? The unknown can be so scary because you don't know this. It's like someone that doesn't have good eyesight, like they wear glasses, for example, right? And when they take off the glasses, they've had that eyesight for so long that they've gotten used to it. And maybe they've even forgotten that their eyesight is in 2020, or they don't have really good eyesight because they've adapted to the world being seen that way. Similar to how we see our partners or maybe how we see ourselves.
Mhm.
But sometimes you have to take a moment and say, what is it that I really want? And I had this conversation with myself in my 20s. And it takes, to your point, it takes a lot of courage to point the finger at yourself instead of everyone else. I remember I told my girlfriend, I was like, the way I operate my life now is that everything that happens to me is 100% in my control. It's 100% my responsibility. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, this allows me to not give away my power to anyone else, saying that, you know what, that person over there did something to me and I'm powerless to solve it. I was like, no, I have
Mhm.
the power to solve it. She's like, I didn't think about it that way. I was like, yeah, it's easier to blame someone else. You know what? Oh, I only all these girls I date, I give them my heart and they step on it. Okay, what type of girl am I looking for? No one has the answer to that, right? So if you don't know what you're looking for and you continue to get the same results, don't you think you should attempt to understand what it is that you're looking for? Right?
Should, yes, but most of us, well, all of us would say, hey, I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for love, right? But the way we're looking for love and what love actually entails, what relationship entails, that we don't know. And just to your point, what you have brought up, I was thinking as you were saying, what would prevent us from having these struggles that you describe is normalization of the fact that often checking in, re-evaluation, checking in with your partner, hey, are we still compatible? Are we still a match? The fact that not every relationship is supposed to last a lifetime. Some of them and it's okay. If we were as a society, if we were to normalize that you go into relationship and it doesn't have to be till death do us part, it's maybe till the next time we reevaluate our relationship status and quality do us part. But it's not normalized. It's once again the romanticized idea of the beautiful engagement and beautiful wedding. And yes, nobody gets married thinking we're going to get divorced, right? We imagine that it's going to stay that way. It doesn't stay that way. So if there was more normalizing that the relationship is work, but if we have the tools to do that work, if we know how, we would be much more equipped to go through all of these ups and downs of the relationship. But I don't think it's normalized yet to the point of full acceptance that yes, there are going to be difficulties. Yes, you're going to fight. Here's the tools how to fight smart, not like going against each other, but fighting like a team. You as a unit going against the problem. We don't learn that. We kind of learn that on the job, right? But then we may throw the towel up because we feel the relationship is not good quality because we have fights. When in reality, conflict is an opportunity to learn each other's values, to go deeper into that vulnerable space. But it's not normalized.
When it comes to conflict resolution in relationships and maybe difficult conversations, how much do you think the fear of being alone or being dumped plays a part in people not having those types of conversations?
I would say it plays a significant role for people that, especially those that tend to have an anxious attachment to their partner, and they don't see themselves kind of surviving on their own. They have to be attached in order to feel like they have some ground. So that would play a huge role into not dealing with conflict as it should be dealt with, but possibly sweeping it under the rug or avoiding it or making a scene and blaming the other, not taking responsibility. There's plenty of options to how not to fight in a smart way. But there are a lot of additional also reasons of why people avoid conflict. And that is something that has to be discovered once again at the very initial phase of dating. And this is what I always say, like, it's not sexy to be on a date and go, hey, so when you get angry, what do you do? How do you manage your anger? Right? How do you handle the conflict? We don't want to talk about it. But then later you get together with somebody, the initial phase, and it's nice, it feels good, but then you hit the wall, and all of a sudden you see this person throwing dishes against the wall or punching the wall. They tell you about it? They did not. They forgot to mention that. You had no idea, right? And this happens all the time. So once again, normalizing that it is okay to have difficulties and struggles in the relationship and providing people with the tools would have saved us a lot of headache.
I find when I look back on some of the people I spoke with who are, what's the term, serial daters who date quite a bit.
Mhm.
And sometimes I'll ask them, okay, what kind of questions you guys talk about or what's kind of conversations? And to your point, it seems like some of the more important questions, or the questions, at least to you and I, would seem like no-brainers to ask. They don't ever ask, like how do you express your frustration? How do you your emotional responses? Things like that, right? Some more of the questions, it seems to be like, okay, I like you. Do you like me? Right? It's it's not okay. Where
Sure.
do you? Yeah, well, you sure, right? Like, what kind of future do you have, right? Like, what's your 5 year goal? Do you want to have kids? Do you want to be married? What type of religion? Is there religion involved? Like, these are things that when you're in a relationship or a serious one and they come up, they could have quite the impact on your relationship. I couldn't imagine dating someone for 2 or 3 years where I want to have kids. And then I'm like, okay, I'm in a financial space to have children. Are you ready? She's like, I never wanted to have kids. I just spent 2 or 3 years. Why do you think then some people avoid the more serious or more detailed conversations or questions in the dating stages, as you mentioned, because they're not having the unsexy conversation. They rather have the sexy ones.
I think it's pretty easy to answer that. It's because they don't want to hear the answer. They don't want to hear the answer that they don't like. Because as you have this person sitting in front of you on a date, maybe you just had a cup of coffee, you had a beautiful walk, and it's just surface like right now, and it feels easy and it feels good. Asking a difficult question, not knowing what going to be the response to you, you're putting that at risk. That means that you have to ask a difficult question, knowing that you're risking that connection. So people don't ask difficult questions because they don't know whether they can handle the answer. So they hope for the best, and oftentimes it doesn't work. I know in my personal experience, I got married the first time, asked no questions. Got married second time, asked no questions, no right, no difficult questions. And then when things started happening, I was like, whoa, I didn't know that. But how would I know? I asked. What did I expect? That was totally my responsibility, and it's just to what you said earlier, when women are very, when our biological clock is ticking and we're like, well, I want to be mother. And they're like, just somebody get me pregnant, please. You completely just overlook the whole process of choosing a partner. That was me many years ago. And I got two beautiful kids out of it, but I failed to ask the right yet difficult questions in order to understand the true compatibility, the true alignment of the person that I got together with, that I married, because I assumed, and this is what people do, they assume, but they're afraid to ask because they are not sure whether they can handle the answer.
Why do you think then they feel or think that they can't handle an answer which they probably know already in their mind? They just don't want to hear it.
Because that would prove them somehow wrong or inadequate, or they have to start over. And once again, we're coming back to that, normalizing the challenge of finding, creating relationship, maintaining the relationship in the long run, and being okay with the fact that you might do everything right, quote unquote, and there's still no guarantee that the relationship will last a lifetime.
And I think that's probably difficult for a lot of people to accept, knowing that if I ask this question, this relationship will go in a direction that maybe I'm not ready for it to go in.
They're holding on to the relationship status instead of paying attention to whether that person truly is aligned with them.
I used to date someone years ago, and if she sees this, she's probably going to want to cause me harm, but it's okay. And anytime there was conflict, her way of handling it was sex. So if there's an argument, oh, I'll come here, me offer this, and so I couldn't ever figure out the origins of that. Maybe because the relationship didn't last long enough for me to do so. And maybe I wasn't as skilled or experienced as I am today. But that was her get out of jail free card. Like if there was a conflict, let's say for example, um, you were I was in a situation and it's like, hey Train, we have an argument. And I'm like, okay, you know what, Irina, this is what really bothered me, or Jane, this is what really bothered me. Like, okay, I understand. You want to come to the bedroom? She would
Mm.
like offer sex. And I can see from a male perspective, even though I didn't fall for this all the time, sometimes I did. I can see from a male perspective, it's very easy to fall into that because you're a man. Someone's offering you sex, right? Why do you, and I couldn't figure out why, but I would like to get your thoughts. Why do you think someone would offer something intimate instead of having the conversation when it comes to a conflict or a difficult conversation?
That's a very interesting situation, and thank you for sharing. I do appreciate you sharing something so vulnerable. So two things come to mind here. It's interesting because when I coach women, I actually tell them when we get to the point of the topic of sexual, physical intimacy, desire, and I put people through that part as well in my coaching. And I always tell them that if there is a conflict, do not allow a man to relieve or resolve this conflict through sex. You need to have a conversation. So it's interesting for me to hear that a woman actually would do it. So what I think was happening is that she was much more connected to her masculine energy than her feminine energy. So she knew how to manipulate it. So she obviously was knowledgeable about the fact that hardly ever men will say no to sex to resolve a conflict with sex. But that also means that she was kind of acting as a man in a sense, in her own way of not resolving or avoiding the conflict, excuse me. Does it make sense?
It does because over time I began to identify that she showed displays of very masculine energy. So that does actually make a lot of sense.
And it sounds like she was quite disconnected and terrified of her own emotions. So, and then there's a tendency to go into much deeper connection to your physical body, right? And it's easier in a sense because it's a tangible, much more tangible experience, right? So, but yeah, I would say that she was just had much deeper connection with her masculinity than your femininity at that point when she was doing that.
Yeah, and becoming vulnerable to your point was something that she really hated to do. And she was actually used that word. She hated feeling vulnerable. And I know that there's some people that may think that, well, yeah, there's masculine, I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, there is masculine energy and there's feminine energy, right? So when in this case, when she was in her masculine energy, she was behaving that way. So instead of her being caring and nurturing and understanding, which are a lot of feminine qualities, she was straight, okay, let me offer this, right? Because I'm the man. No one gets mad at me, right? Or no one has
Yeah.
difficult conversations. You
Yes.
mentioned that you speak to women about that to make sure that the men don't offer that. Overall, does that happen? How often do you think that happens where someone will try to resolve conflict with sex, whether it's a man or a woman? And why do you think it's important to understand that, hey, we don't resolve problems this way?
So there is a bit of a tendency, I would say. Again, it may sound a bit of a like a generalization, but there is a bit of a common tendency, a theme. Men have a tendency to want to resolve the emotional turmoil with physicality because it's easier for them. And it's understandable. You guys are biologically wired very differently, right? So there's absolutely no judgment there. So there's tendency for men. Women, however, do a different yet very toxic tendency as well. They weaponize sex. They take sex away and they punish men by withholding sex, which is extremely unhealthy and extremely toxic for any relationship because both ways is very unhealthy ways to deal with the conflict. It's uncomfortable, right? But neither one of these approaches will actually bring any resolution. You can have a difficult conversation and then have makeup sex. That would be great, but not in the replacement of actually finding a resolution together.
So we're debunking that saying where it says the best way to get over someone is to get under someone, right?
No, no, that's not true. Shh, don't say that.
So, Irina, I'm going to give you three wishes as we close today, right? So you have three wishes, and these are things you can use this in any capacity in regards to what you want people to know. So when it comes to creating healthy, successful relationships, what are three things that you wish people knew and why?
What are the things people I wish people knew? It's only three things, right? In the capacity of healthy relationship. that the first thing that I would love people to know is it is totally okay feel not ready, confused, lost, stuck, in some way inadequate, because you get better as you go through experiences. That's the first thing, that no matter who you are today, you can make a conscious choice to become better next week. But the work needs to be done. But you are good enough today. The second thing I wish people knew is that difficult conversations and conflict is an opportunity and not something to shy away from, because in every relationship there is a presence of initial connection, disconnection followed by reconnection. And it's in the space of this reconnecting where the deeper intimacy actually takes roots. So that's the second thing. Reframing conflict and difficult conversations and actually embracing them. So, and the third thing is uh, have fun, bring joy into your life, enjoy yourself. And when you exude the energy of fun, lightheartedness about you, when you're not tightly attaching to any possible connection, when you're not coming off desperate, that's when you start attracting healthy connections into your life. So joy and fun have to happen first, and then the relationship will happen second.